I still remember the exact moment my husband smiled at me, while standing beside the woman who had stolen my entire life. Neither of them looked guilty. Neither of them looked afraid. They looked happy. The wedding guests applauded. Someone wiped away tears of joy. And I stood across the street, hidden behind the tinted window of my parked car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I wasn't crying. Not anymore. Because 6 months earlier, they had taken everything from me. What they didn't know was that the happiest day of their lives had quietly become the first day of their downfall. My name is Emma Carter, and for 12 years, I believed I had the kind of marriage people secretly envied. My husband, Ryan, wasn't perfect. He forgot anniversaries. He left coffee mugs everywhere. He snored loud enough to shake the walls. But he kissed my forehead every morning before work and always texted me when he arrived safely. Those tiny habits made me believe love was real. And then there was Sophie Brooks. My best friend since college. She had been beside me through everything. She helped me pick my wedding dress. She held my hand after my mother died. She even became the godmother of the baby Ryan and I had desperately hoped to have one day. If someone had asked me then, "Who are the two people you trust most in the world?" I would have answered without thinking. Ryan and Sophie. Funny how life chooses those exact people to break you. It started with something so small I almost ignored it. Ryan suddenly cared about how he looked. New shirts. Expensive cologne. Fresh haircut every other week. When I teased him, he laughed. I guess I'm finally growing up. I believed him. Why wouldn't I? Then Sophie started visiting more often. Sometimes she'd stop by after work with takeout. Sometimes she'd invite Ryan into conversations that somehow left me feeling like the third wheel. I brushed it off. Friends become family. Family gets comfortable. At least, that's what I told myself. One Friday evening, Ryan came home unusually late. His tie hung loose around his neck. "I'm exhausted," he sighed. "Big client dinner." I kissed his cheek. "I saved you some lasagna." He smiled. "You're the best." He headed upstairs to shower. A minute later, his phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. Normally, I never touched it. Never. Trust isn't built by checking phones. It's built by believing you never have to. The screen lit up. "Sophie." My stomach tightened. The message preview appeared before the screen locked. "Tonight was perfect. I already miss you." I stared at the phone. My heartbeat echoed inside my ears. No. There had to be another explanation. Maybe she meant the dinner. Maybe several coworkers were there. Maybe. Ryan's footsteps came down the stairs. Without thinking, I slid the phone exactly where it had been. He picked it up. Read the message. Smiled. Then looked at me. What? I forced myself to smile back. Nothing. That single lie became the beginning of the end. Over the next few weeks, I noticed everything. The secret smiles. The whispered phone calls. The excuses. Ryan suddenly worked late almost every Tuesday. Coincidentally, Sophie also became unavailable every Tuesday. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe grief from losing mom had made me paranoid. Maybe marriage simply changes after 12 years. I wanted every explanation. Except the obvious one. Then came my birthday. Ryan promised we'd celebrate together. He booked my favorite Italian restaurant. I even bought a new blue dress. At 6 o'clock, he called. "I'm so sorry, Em. The client's flight changed. I have to stay." I swallowed my disappointment. "It's okay." "It isn't. I'll make it up to you." After hanging up, I stared at the untouched birthday cake sitting on the kitchen counter. A few minutes later, Sophie called. I'm stuck at work too. I'll visit tomorrow. Another coincidence. I almost laughed. Instead, I drove to the restaurant alone. Not because I wanted dinner. Because I needed fresh air. As I waited at a traffic light near downtown, I saw Ryan's car. It wasn't heading toward his office. It pulled into a quiet boutique hotel. My heartbeat stopped. Another car arrived less than a minute later. Sophie's. She stepped out wearing the same red coat she'd told me she bought for business meetings. Ryan walked toward her. He smiled the same smile he'd once reserved only for me. Then, he wrapped his arms around her. Not a friendly hug. Not comfort. A kiss followed. Long enough to erase 12 years of marriage. Long enough to destroy every memory I'd ever cherished. I couldn't breathe. The light turned green behind me. Cars honked. Someone yelled. But all I could see was my husband holding the woman who called herself my sister. I drove home in silence. No tears. No screaming. Nothing. Shock has a strange way of freezing pain before it lets you feel it. I sat in the dark living room until nearly midnight. At 11:47, the front door opened. Ryan walked inside carrying a paper bag. He smiled like nothing had happened. I brought cheesecake. My favorite bakery. He leaned over to kiss my forehead. I looked straight into his eyes. And for the very first time in 12 years, I wondered how many lies could hide behind one familiar smile. Then his phone buzzed again. He glanced at the screen. And his face changed. I didn't know it yet. But the message he had just received was about to destroy far more than our marriage. Ryan's smile disappeared the second he read the message. It lasted less than a heartbeat. Just enough for me to notice. Then he slipped the phone into his pocket and looked back at me. You okay? He asked. I nodded. I'm just tired. He smiled with relief. Me too. He walked upstairs, humming softly. The same man I had watched kiss my best friend less than 3 hours earlier. I sat there in silence until I heard the shower running. Then I quietly walked upstairs. For 12 years, I had never looked through his phone. That night, I broke my own rule. His phone sat on the nightstand, charging. He had always used the same 6-digit passcode. Our wedding date. Ironically, he never changed it. The screen unlocked. The first thing I saw was Sophie's name pinned to the top of his messages. My hands trembled as I opened the conversation. There were hundreds of texts. Photos. Voice notes. Plans. Inside jokes. One message made my heart stop. Ryan, just a little longer. She has no idea. Sophie, I hate pretending to be her friend. Another. Ryan, after the divorce, we can finally stop hiding. And another. Sophie, do you think she'll fight for the house? I couldn't breathe. They weren't confused. They weren't guilty. They were planning my future without me. As if I were an obstacle. Not a wife. Not a friend. Just paperwork. The next morning, I made pancakes. Ryan walked into the kitchen smiling. Something smells amazing. He kissed my cheek. I almost flinched. Instead, I smiled. Thought I'd surprise you. He sat down. I don't deserve you. No. You really don't. We ate breakfast like nothing had happened. When he left for work, he turned around at the door. Love you. I watched him leave. Then whispered to the empty house. You don't even know what that word means anymore. I didn't confront him. People expected betrayal to end with screaming. Mine began with silence. Instead, I called the one person Ryan never expected. His older sister, Claire. Claire and I had always been close. When I asked if we could meet for coffee, she noticed my shaking hands immediately. "Emma, what's wrong?" Without saying a word, I slid my phone across the table. I had photographed every message. Claire read them one by one. Her face lost all color. "No." She kept scrolling. "No." Ryan wouldn't. Then she reached the hotel selfie. Ryan and Sophie were laughing together, unaware someone else had snapped the reflection behind them. Claire covered her mouth. "Oh my God." Tears filled her eyes. "I'm so sorry." For the first time since that night. Someone cried for me. "I want to tell Mom," Claire whispered. I shook my head. "Not yet." "What are you going to do?" I stared out the cafe window. "I'm going to let them believe they've won." Claire looked confused. "You aren't leaving him?" "Oh, I'm leaving." I smiled for the first time in weeks. But not before I protect myself. That afternoon, I visited a divorce attorney. Daniel Harper. Calm. Patient. Blunt. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he folded his hands. "Emma. Do you have copies of everything?" I nodded. "Texts. Photos. Financial records." He smiled slightly. "Good." Then he asked a question that surprised me. "Has your husband been making any unusual financial decisions?" I frowned. "I don't know. Check your joint accounts." That night. I did. And suddenly, the affair wasn't the biggest betrayal. Over the previous 4 months, Ryan had transferred nearly $80,000 from our savings. Small amounts. $5,000 here. $3,000 there. Always labeled as investments. I had trusted him completely. I never checked. The money was gone. My stomach dropped. Where had it gone? The answer came 2 days later. Claire called. "Emma. I think you need to see this." She sent me a photo. Ryan. Sophie. Standing in front of a beautiful 2-story house. They were holding champagne glasses. A giant sign read, "Sold." I zoomed in. Ryan's arm wrapped around Sophie's waist. The caption underneath, posted by the real estate agent. "Congratulations to this wonderful couple on their dream home. Dream home. Purchased with our money." That evening, Ryan came home unusually cheerful. "I got promoted." I smiled politely. "Congratulations. We should celebrate." "We will." He walked toward me. "You've been distant lately." I looked into his eyes. "Have I? Is something wrong?" For one dangerous second, I almost told him everything. Instead, I reached up and straightened his crooked tie. "No. I'm just thinking." He relaxed immediately. I was worried. "You should have been." Over the following month, Daniel helped me quietly prepare every document, every bank statement, every hidden transfer, every message. Ryan never noticed. He believed I was still the trusting wife who never asked questions. Sophie kept coming over. She hugged me. She complimented my cooking. She asked about my day. Every smile she gave me now looked rehearsed. One afternoon, she held up a framed photo from our vacation years ago. We looked so happy. I stared at the picture. We were. She looked away first. Then came the final betrayal. Ryan asked if we could talk. His voice sounded unusually serious. We sat in the living room. He folded his hands. "I've changed. I don't think we're right for each other anymore." I nodded slowly. "I see." I've been unhappy for a long time. That lie hurt more than the affair. 12 years. Reduced to one sentence. I think we should divorce. He waited for me to cry. Instead, I smiled softly. If that's what you want, I won't stop you. Confusion flashed across his face. He had expected a fight. He got peace instead. And peace frightened him. 3 weeks later, the divorce papers were signed. Ryan walked away believing he'd won. He kept the new house. Or so he thought. He believed the hidden money was safe. He believed Sophie was the reward waiting on the other side. 6 months later, wedding invitations appeared on social media. Ryan Carter. Sophie Brooks. Together forever. Friends congratulated them. People called them soulmates. Some even said, everything happens for a reason. I almost agreed. Because while they were planning the perfect wedding, Daniel had quietly discovered something neither of them knew. Something hidden deep inside the paperwork for that beautiful new house. One signature. One secret debt. And one legal mistake. That was about to turn their dream into a nightmare. The morning Ryan married Sophie, I didn't feel victorious. I felt empty. 12 years of marriage had ended in silence, paperwork, and broken promises. I sat in my car across the street from the small vineyard where they exchanged vows. When the guests applauded, I whispered one sentence to myself. I hope one day they understand what they threw away. Then I started my engine and drove home. I wasn't waiting for revenge. Life already was. 3 days after their honeymoon, Daniel called. Emma, it's happening. I closed the book I had been trying, and failing, to read. What happened? The bank officially rejected Ryan's refinancing application. And? Daniel smiled. They finally reviewed the purchase documents. I remembered the mistake Daniel had found months earlier. Ryan had secretly moved marital funds into the down payment for the house before our divorce was finalized. Under state law, those funds were still considered marital assets. To make matters worse, Ryan had signed legal disclosures claiming the money was entirely his. It wasn't. That false declaration triggered an investigation during the property review. Ryan hadn't just hidden money from me. He had lied on official financial documents. A week later, my phone rang. Ryan. For the first time in months. I let it ring. Then it rang again. And again. Finally, I answered. Emma. His voice sounded nothing like the confident man from the wedding. I need to explain. I stayed quiet. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. No? No. What part? The affair? The lies? The money? Or marrying my best friend? Silence. Then he whispered. They're taking the house. The investigation uncovered every transfer. Every hidden account. Every false statement. The court ordered a financial settlement that Ryan never expected. He was forced to compensate me for my share of the marital assets, legal fees, and the money he had concealed. To pay everything, he had only one choice. Sell the dream house. The same house he and Sophie had toasted with champagne. The same house they believed represented their new beginning. A moving truck arrived less than 4 months after their wedding. Neighbors watched furniture disappear through the front door. Dreams packed into cardboard boxes. But losing the house wasn't the hardest part. Trust was. Without secrets to unite them, Ryan and Sophie finally had to live with each other. Reality replaced excitement. Arguments replaced whispers. One evening Claire called me. You won't believe this. What? They're blaming each other. For what? For everything. Ryan insisted Sophie had pressured him into leaving. Sophie insisted Ryan had promised a perfect future. Neither accepted responsibility. The same dishonesty that destroyed my marriage quietly began destroying theirs. 6 months later, I ran into Sophie at a grocery store. She looked thinner. Exhausted. Dark circles framed her eyes. For a second we simply stared at one another. She slowly walked toward me. "I don't expect forgiveness." I nodded. "You're right." Tears filled her eyes. "I thought if Ryan chose me, it meant we were meant to be together." "And?" She laughed bitterly. "It turns out winning someone by hurting another person isn't really winning." Neither of us spoke. Finally she whispered, "I miss my friend." I looked at her for a long moment. "I miss the woman I thought you were." She lowered her head. There was nothing else to say. A year after the divorce, my life looked completely different. I sold the old house. Not because it held painful memories. Because I was finally ready for new ones. I opened the small bookstore and coffee shop I had dreamed about for years. The one Ryan always called an expensive hobby. It became more successful than I ever imagined. Families came every weekend. Children curled up in reading corners. Neighbors knew me by name. For the first time in years, I built something that belonged only to me. One rainy afternoon, a familiar voice spoke behind me. "Congratulations." I turned around. "Ryan." He looked older. Not because of age. Because regret leaves marks no mirror can hide. He glanced around the bookstore. "You really did it." "I did." He smiled sadly. "You always talked about this place. You never listened." He nodded. "I know." We stood there surrounded by shelves of books neither of us noticed. Finally he asked, "Are you happy?" I thought about the question. Not because I didn't know the answer. Because I wanted to answer honestly. "Yes." He smiled. "I'm glad." For the first time since everything happened. His words sounded sincere. Before leaving, he paused at the door. "I spent so much time chasing the life I thought I wanted, that I never realized I already had it." Then he walked into the rain. I never saw him again. Months later, Claire told me Ryan and Sophie had divorced quietly. No dramatic courtroom battle. No public accusations. Just two people who discovered that relationships built on betrayal rarely survive everyday life. I wished neither of them harm. Because by then, their greatest punishment wasn't losing a house. Or money. Or each other. It was waking up every morning knowing they had traded loyal love for temporary excitement. And once that excitement faded, they were left only with the truth. Sometimes customers ask about the framed quote hanging behind my coffee counter. It reads, "Peace begins the moment you stop fighting for people who stopped fighting for you." They usually smile and say it's beautiful. They don't know it came from the hardest chapter of my life. They don't know that once, I believed losing my husband and my best friend meant losing everything. Instead, I lost two people who were never truly on my side. And in the silence they left behind, I finally found myself.